systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What is going on, Ship It Nation YouTube station? We got a special edition little show going on here today. Tuesday, NHL on the docket. Only one NBA game, I believe, and massive prize pools. It's one of the 4 or 5 nights that we get a year when you can get 5 figures plus, 6 figures even tonight in the NHL lobbies. And got my guy Sheets. He's been red hot in the NHL streets. Excited to jump on here and talk about NHL DFS, and I think we got some nice tools over at Shipping Nation to help the subscribers out. And obviously, I had up all the content in terms of core plays, the slate plan, things like that. But Sheets, bring you in, man. You love NHL DFS. You've been having a heck of a season so far. Screenshots left and right, and yeah, excited to talk through this 10-game slate. I'm glad it's a 10-game, not one of these 14, 15 game slates that typically when they post these big prize pools, that's typically what we see. 10 games isn't too crazy. It's up there, but it's a lot better than the 15, 16 game slates that sometimes we see. How you doing, brother?
Good. I mean, I love NHL DFS. I mean, honestly, I love all of DFS. I mean, to be perfectly honest, every sport provides like just completely different challenges, you know, and they're all just different in certain ways. The reason why I really, really like NHL is it's very similar to baseball, and it's very similar to even to League of Legends, if people can follow this whole logic. And one of the things that's really interesting to me about DFS in general is how different sports emphasize correlation differently than others. Some sports, it's literally just one big projection game, you know, like who has the best projections, you know, one player has nothing to do with the other. And then and you just kind of have to just kind of manage your portfolios that way. But sports like baseball and hockey, where one result is completely dependent upon the other, it's just extremely interesting to me. And that's why I get involved in hockey. I don't really watch hockey like for fun or anything like that. I mean, honestly, with all of DFS, I'm just one of those people that's just been poisoned. And I don't really watch sports for fun at all anymore. Again, DFS has ruined my entire sporting experience, honestly. But hockey for me, I just enjoy quite a bit. And even the sweat in hockey is amazing because I don't know whether they do this on purpose, but it's always these freaking 10 o'clock games that are deciding it. And I don't know why, whether it's because it's 10 o'clock or it's because Edmonton always plays at 10, you know, whatever. But in any case, it's never over. You got that awesome or kind of cruel empty net goal sweat at the end, you know. God forbid it goes to overtime. It's just awesome. It's like never over. And I have to say, I mean, I've been really, really hot this whole season, and I'll share my process with you guys. It's not particularly complicated, but I'm looking forward to hearing you go a little more deep dive-ish, you know, because I don't really do a lot of the individual stuff, you know, whatever. But I want to learn from you as far as this stuff goes, and I don't think it's an accident that the other sport that we've done together is baseball. Right. So I'm kind of interested in hearing how you approach this sport. And listen, we got the whole floor, man. There's one freaking stupid NBA showdown slate on the board, and everybody's playing hockey tonight. And before you guys get all like, oh my God, it must be so soft because everybody's playing hockey. Not exactly. Okay. Because all the people who are like expert sim guys and expert DFS players in general, they're no idiots either, you know. And they don't have to worry about NBA tonight, so they can really hammer it home. So it's not going to be easy, but definitely up for the challenge.
Yeah, no, definitely excited to talk through it. And NHL stacking is obviously key. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. And yeah, I mean, NHL, there's a good foundation and a base of players, sharp players anyways, that play every night. The prize pools are fairly decent for a niche sport in general. You got much better prize pools in NHL than you do some of the other niche sports like League of Legends, things like that, that you can draw some conclusions in. DraftKings has done fairly well at keeping the NHL prize pools serviceable to at least continue to play kind of year round, right? Obviously NFL kind of trumps all sports, right? For a DFS perspective, by no surprise, right? Popularity, things like that. And just everyone loves football in general. So when there's showdown slates and things like that, NHL takes a backseat especially when NFL, NBA, and NHL are going on. But usually we get 4 or 5 nights a year where you get really, really big prize pools. And then every night you usually can see 10, 20K up top, regardless of what your buy-in's in. And usually it's anywhere from $5 to $20, and you have a chance to at least win 5 figures, which anyone can sign up for. The single entry stuff, $12, $5 single entries are usually $1,000 the first, right? So $12, $5, you can build a bankroll that way and at least like get in, test it out, and play it. Looking forward to it. And let's just talk stacks in general here, Sheets. And I know NHL, there's a lot of new viewers, I'm sure, right? This is our first NHL show on the season here. And just like baseball, right, where you want to stack, I say it's more prominent to stack in NHL. And the reason being is the way the scoring works, right? If a player scores a goal, he gets 8.5 points for that. But usually most goals have a primary assist and a secondary assist, and those are both worth 5 points each. So you're talking, if you have a fully correlated goal and you got all 3 guys, you're looking at 18.5 points right away for your roster, which is huge. And the nice thing about NHL is they run line shifts, right? So it's usually 1 to 2 minutes shifts depending on what the team is. So all of your players realistically are all out there getting ice time, anywhere from, depending on the player, the top end guys are going to get anywhere from 16 to 21, 22 minutes, depending on what the team is. So you always have chance for opportunities to get scoring out there. And then obviously the block shots and things like that. But really we're looking for the goal scoring, because that's where the assist and the primary assist, secondary assist, and the goal points come in. And that's really what kind of separates yourself. So I know you have some stacking thoughts, and you kind of hone your stacks into really 3 main stacks that you like to run. And it's one of the only sports that you kind of do manual adjustments in terms of throwing out additional stuff and just kind of really hone it in, and then obviously trust your numbers and your process that you have. So why don't you talk a little bit about the stacking?
So what's cool again about hockey is that because it's a stacking sport, you don't have to get that many things right. You know what I mean? Like in the NBA, you got to get all the players right. NHL and baseball, if you get the stack right, it's probably all going to kind of like fall into place, because if you get 1 goal, it's usually going to come with an assist and whatever it is. And as long as you can kind of accept the fact that the best stack is not always going to win, that you want to, fade high ownership and things like that, I think hockey's a very easy sport to kind of play, okay? Because you don't have to sweat. I don't want this defenseman over that defenseman from another team. It'll drive you freaking crazy, especially in a sport. And I don't know what your thoughts on this, but listen, I love what I've done with my projections. I really do. I've worked a lot on them, and I'm very proud of them or whatever. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's just not really a projectable sport in the way that like basketball is, because of the way that the scoring is distributed. Like you said, it's a guy can get 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 10, you get a little bit of shots on goal or whatever. So it's not as brutal as some of the sports. But this one, it's to differ between one guy at 16.83, another guy at 17.43 is just kind of ridiculous, So like for me, again, because I'm so like enamored with this whole correlation, analysis, I feel is that the amount that lines correlate and players correlate is even underestimated by the industry in general, whether it be individual players, whether it be SaberSim, whether it be whoever. I think that the correlation is even more violent than people realize. So to that end, I mean, what I do, and again, hashtag whatever works, right? I only play lineups that either have a full-on 6-man onslaught, a 5-2, and a 4-3. Everything else for me gets X'd, okay? Pre-flop. And that's, again, something I never do in any other sport, okay? But in hockey, I'm just so confident in this that I'm willing to do it. I'm not even going to build the lineup. I used to kind of like hedge. I used to say, okay, I'll build 5,000 lineups, and then I'll X out like the bad-looking ones, whatever, after the fact. At this point, I'm not even doing that. I just fire them all. Now, with that said, you asked me a very, good question over Discord a couple of days ago. Well, do you do that even in like three game slates and stuff like that? I mean, I guess I'll dodge that question by saying I just don't play 3 game slates. You know what I mean? So I don't know what I would do if I played them. I probably would keep them as just the same rules, honestly. But that's a big, leap of faith that I've just made. And all I can say is that of all of and I've won plenty of GPPs, so many of them have been like 6-man onslaughts and people really, I mean, it's just so cool when the whole team just piles on and gets the win like that. It just happens more often, I think, than people play. So my process is, listen, I look at the projections, I look at my stack ratings, and then I just kind of fire it, so that is my process, but I'd love to go through the game by game and see what your thoughts are on all this stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've always been a 4-3 kind of guy too. And this year and this season, based on doing some lineup study and lineup review of your portfolio and some of the other really good NHL players that usually do MME nightly, I've seen 5-2 and 6-man onslaughts. And the reason for that is usually a team like tonight, we're going to talk about Colorado, right? Massive favorites, the best team in the NHL. So to speak, right? When you have a team like that, I mean, Colorado's probably a bad example because of their prices and the way they shuffle their lines and things like that. It's probably a better example of like a Columbus team who's going to get a lot of ownership here tonight. So teams like that, when most people are going to cut it off at a 4-man stack, going to the 5th or the 6th skater and just making a bet on that team that, hey, they're going to score 4 to 6 goals. And if they do that, you're going to lap the field usually from the guys that have the four skaters, right? So it's a very sharp move in general. And again, when we're talking 4-3, 5-2, you're talking 4 skaters that are all correlated or 5 skaters. So maybe in this first game we're going to talk about is Boston and Utah here, which is basically a pick 'em at Vegas. Both teams implied around 3 goals. Swayman in net, Vanacek in net, at least projected right now. It would be like Nick Schmaltz, Clayton Keller, Gunther, Peterka, and Sergachev, right? Just for the sake of example, that's 5 skaters. They all correlate on the same power play. And then you would find 2 other skaters from another team that usually it's probably value, right? To be able to fit with that. And then you have a one-off, right? Regardless of what that position is. So when we're talking stacking and 4-3, 5-2, 6-man stacks, that's what we're talking about in terms of the roster construction. And that's usually how we approach it. I do the same thing. I always played 4-3. This year I've played a lot more 5-2. Haven't really dabbled too much with the 6-man stacks, but it totally makes sense to the point of adding the additional layer, right? You talk about it in the NFL. It's very similar in NFL. The most popular game environment on the slate, right? Say it's got a 55 total. Most people are getting in there, quarterback +2, one on the other side and cutting it off. Well, how many times do you see the overstack of that game take it to the next level, right? And you get different and kind of have an advantage on the field that way. So let's jump in here, talk the first game like I talked about, Utah and Boston. Boston at home here. Jeremy Swayman's been really, really good, as you can see here by the numbers up on the stone. Boston line 1, pretty expensive in general overall from a matchup standpoint here. Both these teams fairly solid defensively over the last 10 games, respective home road splits from what I'm looking at here. But in terms of expected goals numbers and things like that, Boston is 32nd in the league, actually, over the last 10 home games in terms of expected goals against. Not a game that I love too much from a DFS perspective here. Not really going to pick up much ownership here. What are you seeing from a Boston Utah standpoint in terms of the slate here?
So first of all, the Utah goalie's not confirmed yet, right?
Yeah, it's Vanacek is projected, but yeah, it's not confirmed yet.
Yeah, you gotta make sure everybody's got to make sure they double check these things, and that's I always have to I honestly just go to your Discord with like 15 minutes to post just to make sure that my guys are the same. So a couple of things. First of all, this is going to probably go over because I have all these questions. So what am I looking at here? So the stone, for those of you who have not been watching this for the first time, like what am I looking at? Like what does this like breakdown look like? Why don't you give me like a little tour of what this is here?
Yeah, so the stone, so we have I'll just showcase real quick kind of the tools that we have over at Shipping Nation here for everyone kind of tuning in, because NHL, when you first open it up, right, and you start clicking these guys' name, right, there's a million players because every team has 4 lines, right? There's 3 players on a line plus 3 defensive lines, right, with 2 players. So there's a lot of players per team. Basically, the stone, it kind of takes their starters, the starting lineups, gives them their even strength line, which is who they're going to skate with, full strength, 5v5, right? And then the power play line shows who's on the power play lines for everyone out there and kind of lays it out. And then these are their season numbers, season statistics. How much time on the ice are they averaging per game, right? So Nick Schmaltz, roughly 19 to 20 minutes. He's averaging 19.25. You see there, he's averaging 2.3 shots on goal per game. Goals per game, he's averaging 0.36. Assist, about a half an assist per game. And then the projection ownership for both sides is over on the right-hand side. Okay. And then down on the bottom, same thing, goalie metrics. And these are all respective to home road split. So the teams on the left these are all numbers reflective of their stats for the away games on the season. And then same thing on the right for home split.
And does the stone have stack rankings here, or this is just these are players?
Yep. So we do. The stone doesn't have the stack rankings here, but we do have
right over there. Okay.
Yep. So stack rankings on NHL, we do have the stone, which you just saw there. Slate plan is kind of just the notes, the core plays from myself. The stack rankings for FanDuel and DraftKings here, sorted by, and you can again filter it by ownership, stack score, which is basically proprietary metric that kind of takes into account their projection, their ownership, and kind of basically gives you a summary, right, of what the quote unquote best stacks overall are. And then my favorite tool is the matchup sheet here. And this is something that I had created years ago. Basically it shows all of the team's metrics, home road respective. So the bottom team here, like the Bruins, you see, these are all their last 10 home games. So I filtered to their last 10 games for home, their goals for that they're averaging as a team, their expected goals for, expected goals against. So it really, how you read this chart is diagonal, right, from a matchups perspective. So for example, right, that's where I was talking about expected goals against over the last 10 home games for the Bruins. Expected goals against on average, they're giving up 3.7 expected goals, whereas their actual goals that they have given up is roughly 2.5 on average when you take a 10-game rolling average there. So this is really kind of where I just find the matchups and find the teams on paper that quote unquote have the best projected matchups. And then you go over to the stone and then you can see the individuals, players, who's producing, things like that is kind of the synopsis.
The reason why I ask you like what all this is again, for those of you who don't know me, I've made like the majority of the money in my life basically figuring out who to listen to on stuff that I don't know as much about as they do. Okay. From the stock market to everything else that I do. And I'm really, really good at this, at that skill. And one of the things I like to do is see how much in depth a person goes into the nuts and bolts. And then when I can kind of justify that, then I don't even worry about the nuts and bolts. Then I just go on to the end recommendation. You know what I mean? But to see like all of this stuff that you know, and that's going into all of these calculations or whatever, like it just shows, I mean, what kind of value added there is. So for me, like you could go straight to like the stack, you know what I mean? The stack scores or whatever, and just know that there's like some backbone to that. So for me, like if this is your first time, everybody's first time looking at Shipping Nation hockey, I mean, I'm already freaking sold, at least that there's at least a fundamental base for like all the stuff. Like for me, like I have my own thing. I run my projections, and then I have my own stack scores similarly, and then I just kind of fire it into SaberSim usually and do what I do. Like, so to get back to the actual game, like Utah, Boston, like I rate stacks like 3 ways. One is just by raw points, one is just by points per dollar, and one is just by this kind of like sneaky, like you said, everybody's got their sneaky little metric. So I have like my sneaky little metric, my modified stack score, and I don't have Utah or Boston like even sniffing the top in any of them. So for me, like in hand built stuff, I would say just ignore it. if I get to it in like 150 max, it's just going to be by accident because Sabersim's in a bad mood and wants to give me a really low owned stack or whatever. But as far as like my metrics, my numbers go, I don't like anything from this game. And with respect to the goalies, I don't know what are your thoughts on goalies. I always figured goalies in hockey were kind of like goalies in soccer. Like I don't really care like who I get. I want I want like a low price goalie that fits the rest of the lineup, I guess. Because there's so much variance. I mean, you're dependent on the other teams shooting against you and whatever it's. So I don't really have like big goalie takes like pretty much ever.
Yeah, the only really, I mean, typically in kind of synopsis, usually I'm spending down at goalie. And the reason I'm spending down is because what it does for your overall build, it allows me to flip the build. Most people punt and spend down at defense. And the high-end defenders actually have the ability to separate pretty big.
Oh, really?
At the position from what I've seen. So usually I'm spending down at goalie and kind of my goalie takes at least. Again, goalie is the most variant position in the sport, right? Hockey in general, you can see minus 300, minus 250, minus 400 favorites lose at any given night, right? Probably more so than any other sport, just because of the way if they give up a bunch of penalties that game, right? They're shorthanded a bunch. Really what I want from a goalie is a goalie that's going to see a lot of shot volume. And that's where I go back to the matchup sheet here. And you can see, so like, I'm probably not clicking the Utah goalie at all. The reason I'm not going to do that is the shots for, I'm getting a phone call here 1 second. The reason for that is if you take a look at here, Boston at home is averaging 23 shots on net. So what does that mean? That means if they score 1 or 2 goals, 3 goals, whatever, it's probably going to be a pretty bad goalie score from your goalie. The reason being is the way the goalie scoring works in the bonuses on DraftKings.
Yeah.
If your goalie can get to that 35 save bonus, which the only way doing that is to see a lot of shot volume. So that's really the main metric that I look at when I'm picking goalies and kind of deciding goalies here is looking at the teams that have an outside chance to win. So I think perfect example here. Boston allows a ton of shots on goal per game, right? You see this right here, 31 and a half shots on goal per game on average at home. Utah shoots a decent amount right there. And Vegas has it as a pick 'em. And then I go back to the stone here and see Jeremy Swayman, 7,800, decent price, kind of in that mid tier, has been really good on the year. Vegas has it at pick 'em. He has an outside chance to get the win, which is extra points as well. So that's kind of my goalie thought process is I really don't even care who the goalie is. If he's going to see a lot of shot volume, I have interest in playing him because ideally you can see goalies get there even in a loss. I mean, if you see a goalie see 40 plus shots, which happens pretty frequently throughout the year, those goalies, even if they give up three goals, right, they're going to get there because of the bonuses and all the saves, right? Whereas you could see a high-priced goalie see 20 shots, 21 shots and get the win, but he could get outscored by a goalie that's going to see 40-plus shots and maybe gives up a goal and somehow gets the win, things like that. So that's kind of my thought process there. But in terms of the Utah-Boston game in general, it's probably pretty much Swayman's my favorite play from this game. I'm not really too interested in either side of this game, just like you when I wrote it up from a matchup standpoint. I just think Boston's pretty expensive. And in general, I like other spots more so on the slate. Takes us to the next one here. Chicago, one of the worst teams in the league in general. And they lost Connor Bedard, their best player overall.
Oh, he's awesome too. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a beast. So what I would say is that thrusts Frank Nazar here into probably a ton of ice time in general. He already played a lot, and he's going to have to play a ton in general, just with Bedard still on the IL. Toronto, pretty heavy favorites here at home. Spencer Knight, solid goalie in general. This is a game that Toronto kind of was down my list a little bit here, just because they're expensive and they have kind of struggled as of late in general. But what do you see here? Toronto and Chicago, usually you want to streamline teams against Chicago. I'm not super enthused here. It is a 5.5 total in this one as well. Toronto at home, they just haven't looked great. I mean, they've looked pretty bad offensively over the last 10. They're sitting in bottom 10 in the NHL right now in terms of offensive production over the last 10 home games. So what do you see here?
when you're, when you eventually you're going to have a kid that goes to applies to college. I mean, they look at different types of schools, like small schools, big schools, or whatever. And people that like go to these big schools like Michigan, Wisconsin, or whatever, what they always say is that before you get intimidated, you have to try to find a way to make a big school seem small, and that's why I think sometimes these big slates in like either hockey or football or whatever is try to make a big slate smaller by just ignoring some of these games. And like, to me, like, I'm very, very greedy when it comes to that. Like Toronto, I don't have them ranked like particularly high in any of my metrics. Maybe I have them like 4th or 5th, but raw points doesn't really do much for you when you can't afford them. So for me, I don't have either of these teams putting up anything anywhere near playable in my stacks. So I just assume just kind of move on.
Yeah, that's where I agree, actually. And to be honest, if I picked a side, I would probably mess around with Chicago line 1 just at the salaries, because Toronto's actually, if you go back over to here to the matchup sheet, just kind of talking through this a little bit, not going to do this with every game, but just for the people to kind of get an idea here. If you look at Toronto's numbers against, right, they're averaging 3 goals given up per game over the last 10 home games. Their expected goals match it, right? They're actually 4th worst in the league at 28th. This overall rank. So the numbers on the bottom are their rank, the overall rank. There's 32 NHL teams. So obviously the lower the number, the worse it is, or the higher the number, excuse me, the worse they rank. And you look at the salaries on Chicago, and I think Chicago could be a solid pivot off of other teams that we're going to talk about, teams like Columbus, teams like the Sharks and the Flames that we're going to talk about later. So if I had interest in this game, it'd definitely be more so on the Chicago side of things over the Toronto side. But again, still not a game that I'm super interested in overall. Takes us to the next game here. Flyers, Montreal. I think Jacob Fowler is going to get the start here tonight for Montreal in general. He's 1-0-1, 3.4 goals against average, 89% save percentage. Dan Vladar going to be in net for Philly here. In terms of this one, I think Philly power play is a pretty solid matchup, at least from a numbers perspective here. Montreal gives a lot of penalties, or decent amount of penalties. They don't kill off a ton. They've been very, very bad at home over the last 10 home games, giving up over 4 goals per game on average here. I don't think a ton of ownership is going to go to this Flyers team, and I'm not too worried about ownership in general in terms of NHL, but I think the Flyers are a fairly decent pivot from some of these chalkier teams that we're going to talk to in similar price points. But what do you see here, Montreal and Philly?
Yeah, I mean, on the numbers, I'm not really seeing too much here. I mean, but again, low ownership is low ownership. I'm not really seeing too much of that. But again, I'm just trying to add where I can add here. And one of the things that I wanted to add is that when I was listening to you talk about the Boston team, for example, and this is the thing I think about content. There are a lot of people that are good at content, but like people, the users and the people that are absorbing it need to know how to really like make use of it. So, like for example, I mean, I was looking at my stack rankings or whatever, and I actually had Boston as like a decent, not like super stack, but like kind of like a value stack. But when I was hearing you talking about some of their shortfalls with their they don't create too many chances or whatever it is. Like these are the things that I'm not going to say that I'm going to completely not play Boston because of it. But once I run my stuff, if let's say that I'm getting too much Boston in my opinion, then I'll remember, what you said or, about that and maybe pare them back just a little bit. So like you said, what you just said about the Flyers, if I run my SaberSim stuff and I get 20% Flyers, sometimes I might say, whoa, I wouldn't want that. But because in the back of my head, there's some at least fundamental support for it that I would kind of live with it. But my numbers don't really get me to these teams, but that's my input on that.
Yeah, no, appreciate you adding that there. There is some injuries to the blue line for Montreal, so some of these defenders like Hudson, Dobson are probably going to have to play a little bit more minutes than they already do. But I'm not giving too much of a boost there. I think the Flyers are pretty sneaky overall in tournaments in general. So especially at these salaries, and again, it's mainly from a slate dynamics perspective. We're going to talk about the late night game. And I think to the point that you said off the top of the show, right, it's usually these late games that are deciding the slate. And well, that's because one of those is the San Jose Sharks, who don't play a lick of defense, and their games are always up in pace, and they're always out on the West Coast. So a lot of those West Coast games are usually 9:30 Central Time start. So it is definitely a decided factor.
Not to mention Colorado's a late game too.
Correct. Colorado. You got a lot of those West Coast teams that always play late. So there's always a lot of ownership usually waiting in the late tier.
Well, we'll get there. But one thing to note, remember, so you see all these 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8. Then you have this 2-hour break, between those late games. And I know it's like something people just don't want to do because it's like annoying, but you really should late swap in hockey when you have the opportunity. And this is going to be a nice little slate to do that, because you're going to have like teams that are going to get ownership there. And well, I guess we'll talk about it when we get there, but I guess I'll let people wait on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so you want to talk about this? Are we at the Anaheim game yet?
Yeah, not yet. I know you love the Ducks. I love the Ducks as well.
I just know that game's going to get a lot of ownership.
For sure. So this game right here, the Islanders and the Red Wings, I think this is an important talking point, not because I like this game very much by any means, but I think the Islanders are going to pick up some ownership here. The reason being is not only because John Gibson's in net here for the Red Wings, but you got a lot of injuries on the Islanders side, which is going to thrust a lot of these cheap guys like you see, right? Maxime here is stone minimum price, $2,500 with power play time. He's going to center the top line, right? Because of all their injuries.
Wait. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So which is the guy from the Islanders?
So Maxime right here. I butchered all of these guys' names in general.
That's his last name?
Yeah, Maxime T. 2,500 stone minimum. He's up on the top line. I think I want to check on the news here. There is some news that we were waiting on from the Islanders.
I was going to ask you about that. I was asking about Barzal. Is he in?
Yeah, Barzal. Let me check on the news. Let me see here 1 second. Let me just look at Twitter. He did miss morning skate. He did miss morning skate. And usually if you miss morning skate, it's not a great indication that you're going to play.
Okay.
So if he's out, they're out without a bunch of forwards. So these guys are cheap. They're going to have to play a ton of minutes, but I don't love it. I think they're going to be very popular with some more expensive as fillers, because I mean, look at these price points: 2,500, 2,900, 3,500 for Jonathan Drouin, set top line, top power play. Anthony Duclair, top power play, 2,700. I mean, this is the team that I think people are going to run to from a value perspective. And then if you go over to the matchups perspective, they do have a pretty solid matchup. But again, I struggle. Those guys I think are more productive when they have their power forwards or their Duclairs, right? Their Barzal, or not Duclairs, Barzal, their main skaters, right? Helping them. Red Wings do allow a ton of goals. They're second worst in the league at home ice over the last 10 games in actual goal numbers. I just struggle here because when you take away a bunch of guys from your team and kind of leave it to everybody else that is typically usually not a creator, they're kind of a beneficiary from the guys that are dishing them the puck. That's where I struggle a little bit. And then when you look at the ownership aspect, when I think a lot of people are going to come here for filler stacks, I do struggle a little bit. But projection-wise, I think these guys are going to project pretty solid just because they're down a bunch of guys and they have to fill the ice time with skaters in general. So what do you see here from this game in particular? I'm assuming you're probably going to get a fair amount of some of these Islander guys.
Yeah. What do I know? Cause I had Barzal projected in. So we're going to have to see. Again, it's only, but that my projections are like a half hour old. So that's going to probably going to determine a lot, cause if he's out, like then obviously, like you said, the Maxime is going to pop. So I currently don't have the Islanders as such a good stack, only because my initial projections had Barzal in. So I guess I'm going to have to wait to see what happens with the rest of it. Now, is there, in your experience, like what's like good chalk in hockey versus like bad chalk? In other words, like in the NBA, you get a 3K guy that's going to be starting at point guard. You're not fading it. You know what I mean? But if you have a $3,400 kind of guy that low usage that's going to be starting at small forward, maybe you might. Like, what is a guy like Maxime? Like, if first of all, is he going to get steamed if in fact Barzal's out? And if so, how much? And if so, is that too much? Like, what does chalk look like for you in hockey? What's good chalk versus bad chalk?
So I in ownership in general in hockey doesn't matter too much to me overall, outside of maybe like a goalie. But for example, overall, so let's say going back to the matchup sheet here. For example, in this game, right, the Islanders Red Wings here, right in the middle of the screen. I'll bring it up to the top so everyone can kind of follow along here. If I look at this, so I see right without all the injuries, everything like that. This is a 10-game rolling average, which isn't the whole season, but it's a pretty good sample size of recent form, and obviously the numbers adjust over time, right? But I look at this; they're kind of middle of the pack right now in terms of scoring. From a matchups perspective, I see, Detroit has been really, really bad defensively over the last 10 games. But then I look over here in their expected goals against, it's over a goal less than what they're actually giving up. So in instances like that, sometimes it's a lot more extreme than this, right? But in instances where I'm seeing and I'm expecting a team due for some goal regression to come in their favor, for example, the Red Wings, right? That's where I start to pay a little bit more attention. And then you add in the factors like, okay, they're down a bunch of guys, they're down a bunch of players. What does that do for their defense, which you see right here? They've been very, very good defensively, but those forwards play really, really good defense themselves, right? So in this game, I'm actually more interested in the Detroit side of this game than the Islanders side, because I think those forwards hurt them a lot more defensively. And Detroit's been solid on home ice, right? Expected goals is up there, matches with their actual goals number. You look at the power play matchup here, their top 10 power play on home ice. So that's kind of how I look at it. But from an ownership standpoint in general, I'm not going to look at a guy and say, oh, he's 20%, I can't play him, because in hockey, as you know, right, roster construction, there's so many ways to get different, playing two defenders from the same team, overstacking, like we talked about, 5-man stacks, things like that. So ownership doesn't matter too much. But if I can poke some holes in it and then have my I know hockey takes side of it, that's where I get a little bit more concerned. And obviously that's all reflected in the content.
When does the injury report usually come in? When are we going to know about the Barzal thing?
Usually when they take pregame skate. So it'll be probably about 30 minutes before lock. But usually almost 99% of the time, if they miss morning skate, it's a good inclination that they're not going to play. But again, we'll update. And once they take warm-ups for pregame warm-ups, that's really when
And do you post that in the Discord?
Yep. Next game here, Rangers, Vancouver. This is a game that you talked about, right? Simple, taking the slate down a little bit. I think the Rangers are solid enough to at least take a look at. The reason being is Vancouver lost Quinn Hughes, which is probably one of the best defenders in the league in general. So that's going to hurt their defensive numbers, and they were already not great defensively, one of the worst teams defensively before he was traded to Minnesota. And the Rangers are pretty cheap in general. They just haven't looked great in terms of offense. I think Mika Zibanejad's also going to be out again here, which does hurt their overall production. But I think you could pick some cheap fillers. A guy like Alexis Lafreniere, I think is a decent play. That top line in general is pretty cheap, but they're getting a decent amount of ownership in general as well. And this is a 5.5 total, one that I don't have a ton of interest in. I think the Rangers are fine playable wise, but it's not one that I love. What do you see here?
Yeah, I'll pass too.
Perfect. Mika is in, so that does help them. I think that also inflates their ownership. They were already projected to be fairly popular there. I just think Demko is a really good goalie. In general, he's very talented. He just is stuck on a crappy team that the franchise has just been a mess over the last couple seasons in general. And then they traded their best defender in front of him away. So you could say a guy like Philip Hronek at 3,400 is going to have to play more. And he played a ton of minutes the first game without Quinn Hughes there. So he's going to see a lot of minutes. But Rangers, they're solid. I like these other games that we're going to talk about, including this next one that I know we're going to talk about a lot here. Anaheim and Columbus. Columbus going to be probably the chalkiest team overall on the slate. Anaheim is on a back-to-back. They did play last night. Now they're heading in to Columbus. Back-to-back with travel is never a great thing overall from a team. And Lucas Dostal, one of the best goalies in the league, started last night for Anaheim. So I think we're going to get
Husso, right, tonight?
Yeah, Husso, who he's not good. I think he's like almost a full goal against worse than Lucas Dostal over the season numbers. So I think this is obviously a really, really good matchup in general for Columbus. That's why you're going to see the ownership you're going to see there. What do you see? What's your interest here? I know Columbus is probably pretty high on your list overall, just from a projection standpoint and a matchup. But what do you see here?
Yeah, no, they are. Before you get into that, I have two Anaheim guys I have questionable. Do you know anything about these two defenders, like Mitsu something or other and Kellison? I'm not sure if they're playing. They're stupid $2,600 defenders, but I had them 50% whether they were going to play or not. So I have to make sure that I.
Yeah. This is so we'll have this before lock again with the line rushes because it's part of the first set of games.
I see.
I can look and see if they skated this morning.
I mean, yeah, it's not the biggest deal, but I do like to get that right. And yeah, so Columbus looks to be one of the top three stacks, no matter how I rate these metrics. They look good from a value perspective. They look good from a modified perspective, the sneaky stack score perspective, whatever. And it's just a question to me if whether you're willing to eat the ownership, because I mean, listen, what I see, everybody sees, and they're going to be really popular. And what really popular means, I'm not sure. I imagine that, again, like a lot of guys are going to run Saber Sim, and maybe that'll keep ownership down a little bit, because maybe people just try to get a little off the board. But I like them a lot. I'll probably get market weight of them. And this is one of the reasons why I do like to use Saber Sim to make my builds. I mean, I'm playing a bunch of lineups tonight with all the different MME stuff. And so I don't know how much I'm going to end up really getting of them. Like I won't get like 30, 40% or anything like that. But in like single entry, if I were hand building, I mean, it'd be between them and like maybe two or three other teams as my top overall. That's I guess where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah, I think this is a really good overstack spot, right? For sure. This is probably a team just with the ownership that they're going to command. I think going 5 skaters here is probably my preferred route to play Columbus here tonight. And that's there's nothing really bad to say about them. Their prices are fair. Kirill Marchenko is an incredible player in general. 6,100 is just a bad price point for him. If Lucas Dostal was in that, I'd have a lot more concern with Columbus just because he's a much better goalie in general. So I really can't poke holes in them. They're probably overall one of my favorite teams on the slate in general. And it's just when you play them, you're going to have to play them differently than the field. And I think overstacking is one of the ways to do that. And I would assume once you kind of look at your stuff sheets that you're probably going to get a lot of 6-man and 5-man stacks of Columbus because the Sims are going to recognize that from an ownership standpoint and take it to the next.
I'll let you know. I'm building right now. I'll let you know exactly what I'm going to do.
Perfect. Yeah. On the Duck side of things, Jet Greaves in that he's pretty solid. Anaheim on a back-to-back. I don't love it, to be honest. Anaheim's shuffled their lines all around. So from a power play correlation standpoint, it's kind of all over the board. So you really don't know what you're getting from a correlation standpoint. So it's definitely Columbus for pass for me in this game overall. But let's jump to the next game, which this is probably one of my favorite spots in tournaments overall. I'm seeing super low ownership on this team. And this is a double revenge factor here. Tristan Jarry, Stuart Skinner, midseason trade. Edmonton shipped Skinner to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh shipped Jarry to Edmonton here. And now they're playing each other. Tristan Jarry going back to Pittsburgh here with an Edmonton jersey on. I really, 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 really like Pittsburgh here. They're not favored in this game. This is a dog spot. And because they're not favored and their implied team total is lower than Edmonton, I think a lot more ownership is going to go to the Edmonton side. And obviously they have the big guys, right? Connor McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, Leon, Bouchard at D-man. They have a ton of star power, but I really like Pittsburgh in this game from a matchups perspective. I think it's really good. I think the goalies are equal. I don't think either one has a leg up on the other. Personally, I think they're pretty similar. I really didn't understand the trade overall from an Edmonton standpoint because they also gave up Kulak from their blue line. I think Pittsburgh, especially line one here, is very, very interesting to me. They're one of my favorite stacks on the entire slate. But what do you see here, Edmonton and Pittsburgh?
Dude, I definitely feels a little narrative streety to me. But I'm down with it, especially considering that I think Edmonton's probably going to get ownership, like you said. And the one good way to get a little leverage is to just play the other side. So my numbers don't really support it, but I mean, again, maybe Sabersim will do me a favor and give me some of this. I'm always down for a little bit of that. I would like to say that I can't imagine like a guy going back to another hockey team when they only get like 18 minutes a game is going to make that much of a difference. But you know better than me. So I'm not really getting to it. But now, like you said, now if I get 15%, I'm not going to be the slightest bit upset with it, and I'll root with you.
Yeah, it's not really from the revenge factor. I mean, it's just the goalie aspect. Kulak wasn't really. Yeah, it wasn't really Kulak. I look at the matchups here, and you see up on the screen, right? Pittsburgh been pretty solid, but the expected goals metrics is really what I pay attention to, because expected goals, I don't think a lot of people look at, and that's obviously what the underlying metrics based on shots on goal, unblocked shot attempts, everything that goes into those metrics to come up with these numbers. And when I see a team that's averaging 2.8, but is expected for almost a full goal higher over their last 10 games, and then I also see Edmonton at second worst on the road, right, in terms of expected goal numbers as well. And then you have the also added in factor that, hey, now we get to play against Tristan Jarry, our old guy, right? Little things like that I tend to pay attention to. And both of these power plays are good units as well. So that's kind of why I'm leaning into Pittsburgh here, is from the expected goals metrics matchup. And just their price points, I think, are pretty fair. Their ownership is going to be super low, and their pivots off of teams like Colorado, teams like Toronto, teams like Edmonton, I think more people are going to play those compared to a Pittsburgh squad here. So that's kind of the reasoning for that I'm looking at overall.
Sounds good to me.
Let's jump to the next game here. Now we're jumping into the 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern lock time. So the later window, right? We got this kind of game standalone, and then you got a full 2 hours before those last two games, which is definitely going to be a pretty big talking point in terms of late swap just overall. I know I'll let you talk about that, because I know you late swap almost every chance that you can get, which I don't think a lot of the field does in general. And I think that's probably why it's definitely helped. I'm sure your success, which you've been having a hell of a NHL season in general. So this game, Wild Capitals, I have some interest here in the Wild power play. If I'm playing anything in this game, it's the Wild power play. And there's a couple reasons why. Charlie Lindgren's in net. He's a lot worse overall than Logan Thompson. If Logan Thompson was in net here, I'd be well underweight and probably not like this game much at all. But that and the addition of Quinn Hughes, who's just such a lethal player, especially on the top power play, on an already good power play unit. The Wild already on home ice sits sixth best in the NHL. And then you look at the Capitals penalty kill on the road, 25th in the league, 75%. And Minnesota draws the third most power play opportunities per game on home ice. Capitals give up the sixth most power play opportunities. So it's a really, really good power play matchup here. And this is a spot where I'm playing the power play stack for Minnesota. They're expensive, but I put them right there with Pittsburgh as kind of my spend up lines for the power play in particular, especially on home ice here. And then Brock Faber, I think, is going to have to play a ton of ice time as well with all the injuries that Minnesota has to their blue line. But what do you see here, Capitals and Wild?
Yeah, so I have this stack score of my own here that kind of takes into account not only upside, whatever it is, but also a little bit of leverage and ownership. And it's like the one thing I've never really like published or whatever, to have it for baseball and for hockey. And I'll just kind of like throw it out there. I mean, it seems like a weird team to have, but But I'm in agreement with you. My numbers are in agreement with you. Is that I have Minnesota actually as like the top overall like stack, including leverage, like on the whole slate. Honestly, so I'm kind of happy to hear that you have a little bit of love for it. I mean, Matt Boldy, Quinn Hughes, Kaprizov, Joel Eriksson, like that whole crew. Maybe it's a little expensive, which is what maybe people aren't going to play or whatever. But I like that a lot.
Yeah, and then what I like too is you got Tarasenko, who's a guy that makes it cheaper, right? And you can do a full 5-man power play stack here, which I think most people are going to go in and stack 3 guys. They're going to play Eriksson, Kaprizov, and Boldy. I think adding in Quinn Hughes, who's also expensive, and then Tarasenko, and finding some of those cheap fillers, I think is a really, really interesting way to approach this. And actually, if naturally, I know SaberSim does this a lot too, is when you're overstacking a team, going with the goalie as well. And Gus Bus is what I call him. I think he's a really good goalie in general. 7,500 is a nice price point. Going back to the matchup sheet, looking at the Capitals, they take the 9th most shots on net as well. So he's going to see volume. And anytime he's going to see volume, and I like the offense, I have a lot of interest. So I love the Wild here tonight in general. Capitals, I don't have a ton of interest in overall. I think there's a lot better teams in general. My interest is definitely on Minnesota in this one.
So here we go. We got the 2 late night hammers here.
We got the chalkiest game on the slate coming up next. I mean, both sides of this game, you got to battle 2 turds here. The Flames and the Sharks. This is definitely going to be a very, very popular game. Probably the most popular game on the slate by far because of these price points. I don't really get the Sharks love, to be honest. Dustin Wolf is a really, really good goalie. He's been playing really, really well as of late. He's up there as one of the hottest goalies in the league over his last 7 starts with a below a 2 goal against average. Last time these two played back in November, it was a 2-0 game in favor of the Flames, which I don't put too much into that. But when a team's going to pick up a ton of ownership like the Sharks, the Sharks could come in as the highest owned team on the slate. Because of the matchup, and I just think it's a little. I think I can poke holes in it personally. I like the Flames side more, and I think going to the top line for the Flames is going to be fairly contrarian. But really, the only guy that's getting a lot of ownership from the Flames is Kadri, so I'm not really too worried about it. It's still Sharks. Askarov's been solid, but he's still allowing over 3 goals per game. I think the Flames side is definitely my preference. I'll probably be well underweight to the Sharks in this one, but what do you see here? This is definitely the most important game of the slate.
Do you have Michael Backlund in or not for Calgary?
Let me take a look. Let me see while you talk about it. I'll pull it up.
Okay. So San Jose is going to project to be the best play aside from Columbus, and they have a lot going for it in that respect. They also what I don't mind about playing a bunch of San Jose is that you could screw around later. All right. I happen to think that Seattle, I hate to talk about 2 games at the same time, but I think Seattle is a very legitimate pivot. It's the same time, it's the same prices or whatever it is. So I wouldn't mind playing San Jose with the idea that if I needed to, I could kind of screw around. But I certainly like your idea of just playing Calgary. You know what I mean? Like I think that makes a lot of sense. I just mentioned I have Backlund at 3,700 at center as I'm not sure whether
he's in. Backlund's in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he obviously to me like shows up as well. So I think the game itself is very very viable, and I like your idea of playing Calgary. I'm probably going to start off the slate with a bunch of San Jose, but who knows what ends up happening? Because that's the thing about what's cool about late swapping with SaberSim. You get all these oldest ownership come in all these 7:00 games, and you get a little bit of a peek to see how Columbus is doing, for example, and then you could pivot from your San Jose's to Minnesota if you want, or to Calgary or go wherever. So I am going to probably start off with a decent amount of them, but by the end of the day, who knows?
Yeah, I think Dustin Wolf is a really good play too, because it kind of doubles down on it. And he's a good goalie in general. It's not like he's some trash can. I mean, season numbers in general on the road, he's worse on the road, which usually most goalies are because you can't dictate the line matches. in general. So, but overall, he's been playing really well as of late. It's going to leverage the Sharks' ownership, and he's cheap, and he'll see some volume. So I think Dustin Wolf is a pretty solid goalie option on the slate too. Overall, takes us to the last game on the slate here: Colorado Kraken. Colorado biggest favorites on the slate. I think Colorado too here is pretty sneaky with Brock Nelson, Landeskog, and Nichushkin. Colorado did shuffle around all of their power plays. So the top line, I think, only has McKinnon on the top power play from what I'm seeing. I know they had shifted around all of their kind of lines in general. But what do you see here in terms of this game? Colorado, expensive, best team in the league. Kraken, fairly solid hockey team. Joey Decord, much better goalie, in my opinion, than Grubauer. But what do you see here? Late night hammer.
Colorado, if you got the money, you can play them. And, again, your slate's never over when you have Colorado at the 10 o'clock game. So I don't mind that. I'm going to go back to this. I happen to like Seattle as a pivot off of all this other stuff. So I do like that. I have them as one of my top, like, cheapo values or whatever it is. And I'll just try to, butchering these names, like Ryan Lindgren, Freddie Gaudreau, Kako, Chandler Stevenson, maybe. So I actually do like some of these Seattle guys. These guys have been good to me as well, by the way, over the years.
Yeah, I mean, Stevenson's are always a great value play. I mean, top power play, plays over 20 minutes. He's 3,100. You got Capo Kako. He's a solid skater himself. He's going to see around 13 to 15 minutes. Same thing with Freddie Gaudreau. And those are direct pivots right there off the Islanders guys who I think are much better plays in general. And, yeah, Colorado's great, but, I mean, they're not a stone wall defensively by any means in general. So I think that's really good. And I think we broke it down pretty solid here, Sheets. Overall, any closing remarks here for the people in general?
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on, but I mean, if you're playing hockey for the first time, I would not mess with anything. You know what I mean? Like, I would use the SaberSim, or the Ship It Nation projections, whatever you think, and I wouldn't average them. I would just pick one and go with it. And I would not, if you use SaberSim, I would not mess with the contest fields. I would let it do its thing, and just kind of really be stingy. That's my opinion on the stack situation. I would not get involved in any of this nonsense unless you're. I mean, I'm not that good to be able to play these 4-2-1-1-1-1s and to know whatever. Just pick your favorite stacks and just blast. And if if the team gets 6 goals, you're probably in business. So that's my opinion. And again, just you guys are in good hands with Nades here, with all that he knows about hockey. And between that and the Stone, and then if you use SaberSim to help build, I mean, I think hockey's a really, really good sport for DFS purposes. And yeah, you can make money at it, but it's also, I mean, in my opinion, it's a very, very fun sweat. Most of the time in hockey, you're kind of anti-sweating, which is kind of cool. Like, oh my God, I need like this guy not to do anything for 6 minutes. And you're sitting there just praying that the guy doesn't pull the goalie and stuff like that. But I really enjoy it, and I'm continuing to do well at it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't echo that more. We have all the tools. We showcased a lot of them here. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. I got the slate plan up. I'm going to get the cores up on the site. I'll be in the Discord monitoring because we do have some news to monitor for those first couple games that are locking at the 6 o'clock in about an hour. Morning, or the pregame rushes, the line rushes should come out about 15 to 20 minutes ahead of the game there. So I'll post those. Especially the news on the guys that we're waiting on. Mainly the Barzal stuff is the biggest one for the Islanders there. So I'll do that. Sheets, I appreciate you jumping on here, and maybe we'll come back and do some of these. I'm sure they'll run at least one more big slate over the All-Star break for NBA. I'm sure that's usually always a big night, a big week in general for NHL with the prize pools and stuff. So, no, appreciate everyone tuning in. Like I said, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. And Sheets, couldn't thank you more for jumping on with me here. This was a lot of fun, and I think the chat enjoyed it a lot. So, for Sheets, I'm Nades. Good luck tonight in those contests. Hope to see those Ship It Nation logos chasing down that M Habs up there, up at the top of the leaderboard. So, We're out of here. Peace.